Bella, congratulations on the film. It's really one that stays with you afterwards. I mean, particularly that final scene. So really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's interesting really with horror. It's never really gone away, but over recent years, it's had such a resurgence, particularly the sort of psychological variety of horror. And I wondered what you thought the reasons for that were. Why does it strike such a chord with people?
I don't know, maybe we're all just getting more and more messed up. I have no idea. It's funny because I was thinking about that earlier, you know, the films that I used to like, the horror films that I used to like and used to watch. Then, you know, there's like Hitchcock and Rosemary's Baby and all those films. I mean, surely, you know, they're psychological horror as well. But certainly the films that I most am drawn to in terms of horror, like The Get Outs, Midsummer, you know, Relic, just reading that script I thought was so extraordinary. But maybe it's also, there's something fantastic about psychological horrors in that they tend to, like, Relic is a film that looks at grief, but there's something about the thrill of the horror that allows you a bit of a buffer around looking at grief head on or something. And maybe that's what psychological horrors offer.
So Relic obviously struck a chord with you. I mean, you said you thought the script was amazing. What was the appeal for you? Why did you decide to take the role and go in for the film?
I just felt like when I read the script, it seemed like someone should have made this film already. Like, I couldn't believe there wasn't a horror film about Alzheimer's. And the characters, I just loved all the characters. I loved that the women all had, the mother-daughter pairs each had really complicated relationships and they were kind of snarky with each other, and you could still, it was still assumed that people would root for them regardless. Like the fact that they didn't have to be like bubbly and perfect for them to be empathetic or sympathetic characters. And I just thought its depiction of grief and just this idea about, I mean, just that final scene, like reading that, I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop thinking about it after I read it. I couldn't stop talking about it. Like, I just couldn't let this film go.
And that final scene has such an impact actually on the screen as well as when you read.
Well, that was the only, you know, that's the thing when you read and you think, God, how do they pull this off? You know, and thankfully, you know, Natalie managed to, because that could have just been the, you know, unraveling moment of the whole thing otherwise.
And of course, Natalie's got a very personal interest in the film. I wondered if there was anything in your own life that you were able to bring either to the story or indeed to your character.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I lost my mum when I was 12, so that was certainly, you know, like running around a maze, banging on the walls, screaming for your mother. That was, it definitely got me every time. And certainly the idea of, you know, like seeing someone who's on their deathbed and on morphine and, you know, it's not Alzheimer's, but it's certainly being in the room with someone who doesn't recognize you, and the person who used to look at you like you was the most special thing in the world, and now you're just estranged to them. I know what that feels like, and it's just one of the most horrible feelings. So it was certainly personal to me too in that way.
And you just mentioned there the scene when you're in, if you like, the labyrinth, where you're hammering on the walls and you're all by yourself as well. I wondered if there was anything in the film that perhaps played on your own personal fears, or whether there were actually times when you felt it was getting a little bit too close for comfort.
Ah, definitely. I mean, I actually thought at one point that Natalie was playing some like horrible director's prank on me, because there was, I handed over all these photos as set dressing, like photos from my childhood, and I hadn't even checked them, which is, you know, that's on me. But I remember going into the labyrinth and there were photos of my mum, like right up until like crawl space when all the walls are closing in, and I'm like crawling along and you can't even see the set dressing, but I was crawling along. There's like a photo of my mum as a young woman, and I was just like, what is happening? But certainly that moment, like the walls closing in, I like many people suffer from claustrophobia, so that was, you know, not much acting was happening on set that day. It was all just done for me. That's
above and beyond the Call of Duty, I think. it did strike me that the film certainly looked like a very sort of tight production, small cast, a lot of interior scenes. And that means that it was really important that you had a good relationship with your co-stars as well. But how did you go about building that relationship with Emily and with Robyn as well?
It was interesting. Emily, something happened and she missed the rehearsal process. Like there was some incredible drama that happened with her flights, and she was ill, and that was certainly a concern of ours. And I remember like going into rehearsals with Robyn and like really consciously trying to forge this relationship, because the granddaughter dynamic was so felt less complex and closer, certainly in the beginning. And I feel like we basically just did trauma bonding. We just opened up about our lives and our feelings about the scenes and the characters and how they related to our own lives. And then Emily, it was just so organic. Like I met her, we got a lift to work, and she just like came in like a hurricane, like a whirlwind, and she was just fantastic. And we were kind of like fast friends from day one. So that one was that I feel like that didn't even happen consciously. We just like fell into it.
Now, you've actually been in quite a few sort of either horror or horror type movies, apart from Relic. You were in Neon Demon, you were in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, you're in Dark Shadows. Are those your favourite types of films? Are you a bit of a horror buff?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like if anything, I'm probably a rom-com buff more than a horror buff. But I've certainly like grew up with them. You know, like I saw It when I was like 3 or something. My brother was babysitting me. I love like the slasher horror films when I was in my teens, and you know now it's like Midsummer and Get Out. I certainly appreciate those films, but I'm not sure how I end up in them. Maybe I'm just drawn to things that are a bit darker than others.
And the film's actually being released in the UK on Halloween weekend, which is
amazing.
Perfect, really.
Yeah, good timing.
Your favourite time of year? Perhaps not, by the sound of it. Maybe you're more of a Valentine's Day gal.
Oh my gosh, Valentine's Day. No, I mean, I think I always grew up, Christmas was a big deal, but Halloween's so strange for me. Halloween's something that only really came to my attention when I moved to America. Like growing up in Australia, it just wasn't a big deal. It also feels like such a fall thing, and growing up and it's like hot or like getting hot, and yeah, I'm certainly learning a lot more about Halloween as the longer I live in the States.
Bella, thank you very much indeed. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Freda.